This completes a life journey.
Yeah.
Like, this is the show that I've always wanted to be on. I've aimed my career over 50 years of getting to this point, and now I'm here. So whoever it was who sent you that email, they were definitely working on my behalf, because they got me to where I wanted to go.
Peter's a good liar.
Yeah. it was Jillian who was promoting your book, but like, it's just so great that now you get to do the shows that matter.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, that's what I've been waiting for all those times. I was on Cronkite, I was on the National, I was on, you name it. I was
ice surfing.
But But
what'd you laugh for?
This was the one.
Well,
and now I'm here. I feel like liberated.
We are thrilled to have you on. Now, Peter, when you were, you got your new book, and we want to talk about it. It's called Off the Record, Peter Mansbridge. We'll get to it in just a second, but I got to ask you, when you were on the National, were you allowed to talk about, or were you allowed to openly in the streets talk about the fact that you were a Leaf fan? I mean, this is a national broadcast in Canada, and you know how regional we are. We love our teams regionally, and everybody hates the Leafs. So were you allowed to talk about it?
And everybody, tended to think that CBC was only in it for the Leafs, right? In terms of its hockey broadcast. No, I had a bad rep for hockey because people believed that I hated hockey because I was always upset about how hockey would bounce the National around in various time slots, and especially during the playoffs. So they had this whole image of me that was anti-hockey. But when they got over that, it was, he's a Leafs fan.
Okay.
Even when I told them that I was also a Jets fan, because I'd lived in Manitoba and I was there when Bobby Hull signed. I was there at the corner of Portage and Maine when Bobby Hull signed the whatever it was, his contract with Benny Hatskin, who was the owner of the Jets. And, it seemed like such a big deal then, right? $1 million for a hockey player.
Back then.
That couldn't happen, right? But it did. And I think that was like for a 3-year contract for $1 million. But anyway, it was a big deal. And as a result, I was a Jets fan and remained a Jets fan. Wow. In fact, I had season tickets to this latest incarnation of the Jets for 5 years, which were always taken by my grandkids and my daughters in Winnipeg. So, but anyway, I've been both a Jets fan and a Leafs fan, but the Leafs thing goes back to the 50s when we came to Canada.
Before we dive in, I want to put Peter Mansbridge into perspective for, we have a significant portion of American listeners, and it's really, and international listeners, but it's like 30% of people that listen to this show are American at least. Could be higher. And so Peter Mansbridge, for all of us growing up, was the voice of the biggest national broadcast in the country, which was The National, aptly named. You mentioned Walter Cronkite. That's who we compared you to on the previous episode. You're Canada's version of that. And I know this is going to be an awkward question, but do you ever are you ever able to process the effect that you had on this country in that realm? Like, has that ever sunk in for you that you're like, wow, that's a pretty big deal?
It sunk in more since I stepped away from it all 4 years ago when I retired from the National after 30 years anchoring it and after 50 years on the program. The first 20 was as a reporter. But I don't think when I was there, I mean, I knew it was an important program to a lot of people, and people would come up to me on the street and say hello and all that. But it was after I left that I really started to get a sense from people who would come up and want to talk and say, I used to sit on the couch with my dad and we'd watch the National. That's how I learned about what was going on in the world just when I was a kid. And I grew up through that, and I grew up with you. Now, listen, that really made me, feel old when they talked that way, but it also made me realize how important the program is, or the program was, in terms of the relationship between those who wanted to be informed about what was going on around them and the people who were bringing that information to them. So it was a big deal. There's also been a lot of, new Canadians who've come from other parts of the world, who have come up to me and said, when I came to Canada, I couldn't speak English. And I learned to speak English by watching and listening to you on the news. Now, when somebody says that to you, it's pretty overwhelming, right? I mean, they're not talking about me personally. They're talking about the program and they're the kind of institution that news and information is for Canadians. And, that element of it has been pretty overwhelming to me.
Do those experiences change who you are as a broadcaster? Because the more people I meet, the more I don't know if you do this, but I picture a certain person sometimes when I'm talking, and then I hear, a kid will watch it with their parents, or a new Canadian will watch it who maybe doesn't have the greatest grasp of English. Does that change how you are as a presenter?
I'm not sure. You're a better example, Dangle, of that than me. I mean, when I first watched you,
I don't know that.
Yeah, when I first watched you, it was on what you do so incredibly well, is your rants and the editing style you put together with them, and you go, wow, what's this guy like? Is this guy like this all the time? Is that like how he wakes up? Is that how he talks in his house? And so when you see you like this, it obviously not had an impact on the way you really are. Or I don't know, maybe that's the way you really are, and this is the fake Steve Dangle. I don't know.
You'll never know.
Yeah, but what you try to do as a journalist and a presenter of the news is you're neutral, you're impartial, you're just trying to present the information as best you can in the proper context without any spin. Just give them the facts, let them decide for themselves what they want to believe, right? That's what you're trying to do. And if you get carried away with the position you're in, that can sometimes get in the way of what your goal is. Well,
and I forgot about this, but I pulled it up because I remembered it. If you want to get to know Peter a little bit too, Peter's also got a Disney side. Did you know this?
No.
Peter Mansbridge was in a Disney movie called Zootopia. He's an anchor called Peter Mansbridge. Oh. And he is the co-anchor on ZNN because it's American. ZNN.
Yes.
And Peter, I have to ask this because I'm a bit of a nerd for this stuff, but I remember I was an entertainment reporter at the time. I was at the premiere. So I want to know how that came about for you and what it's like doing a Disney movie.
Well, first of all, you have to remember whenever you mention Zootopia, you have to say the Golden Globe winning, Oscar winning film Zootopia.
Absolutely.
You must. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Right. Yeah. I mean, listen, you were an entertainment reporter at one point, Adam, and you clearly, that on that film, which was a couple hours long, there were about 8 seconds in there that made it that Oscar-winning film. And it just so happens those were the 8 seconds I was in the film.
There it is. Yeah.
Listen, that was a fluke, as much of my career has been, a fluke in terms of how I got into it. But, I was going through security at the Pearson Airport one day trying to catch a flight to Vancouver where I had a speech. And this guy yells out, "Hey, Peter Mansbridge, I got to talk to you." And he was in the line, a couple of spots behind me. So I waited for him. He came up to me and he said, "Look, I'm the vice president of Disney." and we were just talking about you in a meeting. And I said, "Right, yeah, sure." And he said, No, we want you in our next big animated feature. They'd done Frozen, which was huge.
Yeah.
And he said, "This one, Zootopia, is going to be just as big. And we've got a character we've created for you and the whole bit." And I said, no, I can't do that stuff. It's against CBC regulations and all that, BS that happens. And so he said, no, we really want you. And I said, well, send me a letter. I've got to catch my plane, blah, blah, blah. So one thing led to another. And eventually they put forward this offer. I took it to the CBC and I said, look, it's Disney. It's going to go worldwide. Hundreds of millions of people are going to see this. And it's 8 seconds long. Really? Why would we give this up? And they said, no, it's, we can't do that. Anyway, I fought it, and it was, I knew it was going to be my last year. I hadn't told them yet, but I knew it was going to be. So I told the powers that be that, look, this is a great opportunity for me, for my kids and my grandkids. Let me do this thing. So they eventually relented. They said, can't accept any money. And I said, no, I've told them already. I won't accept money. And they said, so Disney says, we have to pay you something because of union regulations.
Oh, jeez. Right?
And so right there, you see that thing hanging on the wall there?
Yeah.
The
check?
Me? That's a check from Disney. I've never cashed it. It's for $1.
Wow.
A US dollar, mind you.
Wait.
Wow, that's $1.23, I think, today.
That's right. Exactly. So that was my payment. And they gave the rest to a very good charity, actually. But it was fun. It was great. But it was 8 seconds long.
Well, you've made it, because of that 8 seconds, you've made it into the Disney Wiki. They have a Disney Wiki. He's in there, and they go into a whole explanation about his character. But Peter, that's in your book. I mean, that's part of the stories in your book. And it's called Off the Record, Peter Mansbridge. Peter, can you tell us about this book, the Canadiana in it, and what if we're, when we catch it and we read it, what are we in for?
You're in for a lot of different stories. Some are funny, some are emotional. They all talk a little bit about journalism, a little bit about Canada. And the idea here was for me to tell stories, to tell, that's what great journalists do and good journalists do and mediocre journalists like myself do. You tell stories and you fascinate your audience in some fashion. So the idea behind this book was to be anecdotal about my career, which is what I do here. And I tell, I don't know, there's probably 60, 70 anecdotes in here. You can move through this book fairly quickly. But as I said, it touches a lot of different things. And they're the kind of stories that you end up telling around the dinner table or in a bar to your friends, because they're not what happened on the air. They're sort of what happened behind the scenes on various stories. And sometimes, as you guys know, as well as I do, those are the most interesting parts of whatever it was you were covering. And so most of these stories I've never told before, certainly in public. But I think it's entertaining. It's been on the bestseller list for 9 weeks or something, and it makes a great Christmas gift.
Simon & Schuster must love you.
Yes.
So when I wrote my book, I don't know if you know this, I wrote a book. So I didn't write it.
That was the one with all the pictures in it, wasn't it?
Yeah. I go by an alias. I don't like to talk about it. It's Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
And so there's I didn't write it in order, obviously, like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. But I started to want to do the book more and more because I started thinking about it every day, and I had certain stories in mind. What was the story, or I guess the chapter in this book, where when you were thinking of the concept of the book, you're like, this has to be in it?
Well, that happened with a lot of things. I mean, over time, you start to collect these things. You're still a kid, Steve, really.
Sure.
And so you've got lots more stories to come. So you got many volumes of this book.
Hope so.
You allegedly wrote.
That's a bestseller, Peter Mansbridge.
Anyway, so I've been obviously collecting these over time. And there have been a number of times where I've kind of jotted down a line or 2 lines or maybe just a couple of words that represent that story so I don't end up forgetting it. But others have come up to me and said, "Are you going to tell that story about such and such?" And I go, "Yeah, of course I am." And then as soon as I leave, I go, "My God, I forgot that one. I better write that one down." So, I mean, that's been pretty much the process on this book. I had a bestseller last year as well. You didn't call me to be on your program.
Wow, you didn't offer. No, yeah, you were. That's why you were on ice surfing.
Yeah.
But that was a lot different because it was stories about other Canadians. This one, Simon and Schuster pushed me. You got to do something about yourself. I said, I don't want to write a memoir because that feels like, you're almost dead, right? Here's my memoir, and now I'm gone. Because I'm still working, I'm still doing a lot of different things right now. It's just up in the Arctic a couple of weeks ago, doing a documentary on Arctic sovereignty, and I got a lot of things in the fire. But anyway, they said, let's do this, and so last summer, not the summer just gone by, but the summer before, through the first summer of the pandemic. How long are we going to be saying that? Like 10 years from now, we're going to say, remember the 8th summer of the pandemic?
Yeah. I hope not that long. My goodness.
Yeah.
We'll wake up tomorrow.
Although we're already longer than the Spanish flu was. And all they had was masks. And we got all these other, magical things, and we're still in it. And from every indication in the last few days, we're going to be in it for a while yet. Anyway, I digress. It became an easy thing to do through that first summer of the pandemic because there really was nothing else to do. I sat in my backyard and I wrote this book, 90,000 words, and it took 5 or 6 months, but that's what I did.
Wow. Yeah, I remember going through the book process with Steve as his friend, Peter. I've known Steve since high school. And
was he like this in high school?
Oh, yeah,
seriously.
absolutely.
Would he get up in class and he was screaming and waving his hands?
Absolutely. Yeah. He actually used to do, so Peter, Steve used to do the morning announcements. That was his big thing.
Oh no.
And he'd turn it into like a radio show. And then he would do, sometimes he thought it was hilarious to do the entire announcements, not a little bit, but the 3-4 minute long announcements as Elmo. Because he did an Elmo impression. And by the end of it, people were ready to jump through the speaker and strangle him. But
I've had better ideas, Peter Mansbridge.
but yeah, so jumping.
I better not let Disney hear you.
Yeah.
Where's my deal?
Yeah.
I charge more than $1. Just let them know.
Peter, it's jumping through those hoops with Steve, because I felt Jesse and I definitely felt like we were on that journey with you every single time we got together for a show, and we did 100 shows a year at that point. We're doing even more now. We'd hear about the update. What's the update? Oh, I got to hit this deadline. Oh, I got to hit this. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I'm going to have to stay up all night. And I just wondered, because Steve made it feel like it was one of the most stressful processes he's ever been through, and it probably was. I'm not trying to take from that. It sounds like with you, I'm getting this picturesque version of you in a backyard surrounded by greenery in the summer, and the birds are chirping, and you're typing away, and then all of a sudden, poof, you have a bestseller. Is that how it went for you?
That's exactly how it went.
Okay. Well, I guess some people are just good at this.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I had a good editor as well at Simon and Schuster who was able to, because what I did was I wrote all these anecdotes, I wrote all these stories, whatever there were, 60 or 70 of them, and I sort of delivered them. I said, well, here they are. How do we make a book out of this? So they went through it all and determined. They came up with potential orders for these anecdotes. The run list, the chapter list, how it would all work. But it is basically the scenario you explained. It's not like Steve has. I guess whenever there's a Leafs game, and he's got to decide: A, is there enough here for my little shtick? And if there is, I got a gun to my head on getting it done.
Yeah.
Within the next couple of hours. I don't know how he does it. I really don't know how he does it, because I look at that production and it's, it's it's pretty amazing. But for me, it's I signed a contract offer, and they said, okay, we want it for the fall of 2022. Well, I'd finished it by the early part of this year, 2021, and so they moved it up a years. But I mean, there was lots of time.
Right.
But the process was simple. I sat for the most part in my backyard. Early mornings. I like doing early morning writing, so I'd be up at like 5 or 5:30, and I'd get out there and write.
Wow.